Day 643 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at the Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 327,000 military personnel losses, with a jaw-breaking 1,140 added in the past 24 hours. Do note, Russian losses are now higher than ever before in Ukraine when taken from an average monthly perspective. For instance, there has been an average of 931 Russian soldier losses per day for the month of November so far, although realistically now that figure is likely to end the month even higher. And to put that into context, the previous high was an average of 776 Russian soldier losses per day, occurring back in May, which is from back in the Wagner and Bakhmut days. And of course, the current record-breaking high, or the average high, coincides with the Russian army trying to capture the town of Avdiivka. Then we'll move across to the hardware losses, so 15 tanks, 27 APVs, and a respectably whopping 32 artillery pieces. Then we'll move across to the map and start out in Ukraine today, as Ukrainian air defenses shot down all 21 Shahed drones fired from Russia into the country overnight, and 2 out of the 3 Kh-59 cruise missiles. And although I wouldn't call this a massive salvo of missiles and drones sent by Russia, especially since it was largely neutralized, I would, however, suspect it to be probably big enough to warrant a retaliatory Ukrainian one-way drone strike of their own much later tonight. Then we'll move into the Donbass, into the said town of Avdiivka, as Russian forces have been attacking in 6 directions into the town most recently, with particular heavy fighting ongoing near the Avdiivka coke plant in the north, but also in the industrial area southeast of the town too. But there is no changes on the map here today, at least in terms of these 6 vectors of attack so far. And that is in part due to armoured vehicles having a hard time in the existing muddy and somewhat snowy weather conditions, as those vehicles are needed to make a push on the map. However, Russia accepts no limits, and thus continues to send failing infantry wave attacks still to this day right here into the attritional meat grinder. Then moving along, somewhere in the east, a Ukrainian FPV drone finished off a Russian BTR-82 armoured personnel carrier, although I'm fairly certain that this occurred on the outskirts of Stepova in the northern flank of Avdiivka. And not that it matters anymore, but moments just before it was hit, you can see the Russians were storing mines on top of the vehicle. So now it's just a pile of trash that could have been mistaken for a pile of trash just moments before its demise. But also, this Russian APV seemed to serve a very specific purpose for Russian forces, as it had a trench electronic warfare system and anti-drone gun installed on top. But the vehicle pushed too far ahead forward on its own and exposed itself a bit too much in something of a desperate attempt to suppress AFU drones, which is something that Russia has been having significant issues with containing here and in other regions as well. Then we'll move all the way down south on the map today into Crimea, as recent storms in the occupied oblast really did a number on railway used by Russia, as seen in this footage. And also nearby in the Black Sea, the ongoing storms in the whole larger area here on the map managed to literally break apart and sink a Raptor, which is a Russian patrol boat that is now joining the world-famous Black Sea underwater fleet. Then moving off the map today, not much in terms of updates, as everybody appears to be getting a little bit of a reprieve as a result of that stormy weather. So we'll move across to some news, start out with some Ukrainian hardware updates again. So it appears that France's contribution to the Ukrainian Air Force might be coming sooner than we think, with some recent talks between the two countries highlighting the likelihood of Ukraine receiving the Mirage 2000 soon. Now, we already know that Ukraine has been training on these since the first quarter of 2023, and the planes could provide a welcomed boost to the Ukrainian Air Force, due to being a multi-role fighter that serves roles such as air-to-air combat and ground attacks. Plus, they have all around strong air superiority capabilities too. But also, and not the least of which, they can be equipped to carry the Scalp EG and or Storm Shadow missiles. Then we'll head across to some Russian economy news, as I like to call it, as there has been some evolving dynamics regarding the Power of Siberia 2 gas pipeline project, which is a significant energy venture between Russia and China. So recent developments suggest a shift in their negotiation balance, with Beijing now demanding substantial gas price discounts from Moscow. This demand comes amidst a backdrop of economic pressures on Russia, which is reportedly under significant pressure to secure the viability of its gas exports. Do note, the construction of the pipeline, which has not started yet, is not just a matter of energy strategy, but also of economic necessity for Russia, as failure to build the pipeline would mean that Russia has no alternative outlet for these gas volumes, which could lead to significant financial loss. Meanwhile, China currently has no significantly pressured needs for additional gas sources until sometime after 2030. Meaning, China has quite the leveraged position in these negotiations right now, which will likely see Putin groveling at the feet of the Chinese president Xi Jinping and end up causing Russia to pony up most of the nearly $20 billion cost for the pipeline. The unshakable strength of BRICS unity. Oh, and speaking of BRICS, that backstabbing consortium of, that bountiful consortium of emerging economies is far from balanced in terms of overall economy sizes. But perhaps most shockingly right now is that Brazil has just eclipsed the size of the Russian economy, downgrading Russia into fourth place and therefore second last place on the list. Not much of a bargaining position there. Then in some other news, this week Russian President Vladimir Putin addressed the country's demographic challenges, stating that Russia needs to preserve the traditional strong multi-generational families of the past, where 5 or more children are to be brought up in Russian families. Okay. So I have a lot to say about this. I should have left it for the funnies section because, oh boy, where to start? For instance, maybe you shouldn't have set a foreign policy that is literally exacerbating an already existing demographic collapse in the making for your country. Or how about a plan to pull out of Ukraine ASAP and give those people a chance to breed in an otherwise more prosperous nation, or better said, as a less unprosperous nation, where you currently have tens of thousands of your very own that are dying every month. Or another thing, how about actually using your energy wealth to expand the quality of life of your people that leads to larger and more abundant families in the first place? And on top of that, how about using that wealth to construct a society that actively promotes and encourages people from other nations to come to your country to live and work? I mean, what a smorgasbord of things I could say here. Then moving across to a couple of quick funnies to round it all off for today, guys. So the media group Russia Today, their editor-in-chief and propaganda mouthpiece, Margarita Simonyan, is at it again on late-night Russian TV, which is sometimes like a comedy hour special, if I'm to be honest, because in this airing, she continues to push the Kremlin narrative that sanctions won't harm Russia. So first of all, great, then let's keep those sanctions up. Then she goes on about this magnificent Chinese car her family just bought, stating how much cheaper it is than European cars. And so Solovyov, right next to her, chimes in and asks her, "What's it called? The red flag?" Then she responds saying she can't pronounce the name, but it's absolutely tremendous. At which point you can immediately hear people in the background laughing. But then she goes on to really double down and says that she bought 3 pairs of Gucci shoes from China for 2,000 rubles each, which is about 20 US dollars each. I almost feel embarrassed for them. And just how they continue on with this clown show talking like this, it's extremely cringe. Then, as for a final funny to round it all off today, guys, so as part of Russia's latest effort to address its own fiscal challenges, the country has drafted new laws expected to take effect on May the 1st, 2024, that will further increase the excise tax rates on many types of alcohol products. For instance, alcohol such as spirits or liquor will have a tax increase of about 700 rubles per litre, which is approximately equivalent to $7 per 30 ounces. Bearing in mind, the average annual wage of a Russian, or at least a working Russian, is about $12,000 a year. But perhaps what's most notable about these amendments is the tripling of the excise tax on wine. Add to that, all of these tax increases will be placed on top of the recent new tax increases on alcohol that occurred earlier this year. So these types of actions by the Russian government might unironically be what finally does this country in, especially for this vodka-loving nation that has one of the highest rates of alcoholics per capita, with the data showing that a staggeringly high 21% of the Russian population are in fact alcoholics. I mean, take away a Russian family's fathers and sons to die needlessly in a foreign country for a war they don't understand, and Russians will get a bit iffy about it. Or take away their means to make a living, and Russians will get a bit iffy about it. But take away their vodka, then there's your Russian Revolution right there. That I'm sure would be the last straw for many of those folks. And it really must be added here that it seems Putin has a short-term memory, because during the final years of the Soviet Union, its leader, Gorbachev, pulled a similar stunt restricting alcohol, which was met with fierce backlash just before the collapse of the Soviet Union, which, by the way, was in fact considered as one of the many indirectly contributing factors to the fall of the Soviet Union. True story. So dictators need to keep a careful balance between hopelessness and inebriation, because raising the price of alcohol could really tip the balance. Just like these two Russians right here, trying to tip the balance on the Eternal Flame Monument in Novosibirsk. So that's going to be it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please leave a comment, subscribe, hit the like button, all of those nice things. And I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.